Alright, so Batman Caped Crusader came out recently and was essentially branded a spiritual successor to Batman the Animated Series. Easily one of the best animated shows of all time. However, it seemed like lots of people were making accusations about the show before it even came out. They either ridiculed it, calling it woke garbage, or defended it to no end because one of the original creators of the animated series, Bruce Timm, was involved in the creation of it. Now, sometimes it's easy to predict when a project is going to be bad, especially when there's a given track record of a studio constantly turning out crap, but being a massive fan of Batman and Bruce Timm's work, I was wanting to give the show a chance. So after the dust has settled, and people aren't talking about it anymore, now I think is the perfect time for me to give my 2 cents on the issue. 3 weeks after it ended. Yeah, sorry about that. I think the reason I waited so long to make a video on this is because I wasn't sure how to approach the controversy surrounding this show without pissing off both sides of the internet conflict. What controversy am I referring to? The gender and race swaps. Yeah, I'm going there. Now listen, I hate the word woke. It's been used to death by so many bad faith actors online. I've been guilty of using it myself, but I always try to use it in good faith or differentiate when I talk about diversity in media. I also want to clarify that I don't want to speak on behalf of any faction online. I like and dislike points made on both sides of entertainment and cultural debates. And while sometimes one side will be more right than the other on issues, Batman Caped Crusader is a unique case to me. Is it a masterful successor to the animated series? Is it a dumb show for woke SJW libtards? Or is it a mixed bag of people operating in good faith but just missing the mark? Let's find out. No! So right out of the gate, I want to address the elephant in the room, which is the Caped Crusader race and gender swapping certain characters. Now, the excuse given for the changes was this is an alternate timeline for Batman, so it isn't trying to operate within the existing Batman mythos. That's why characters like Penguin are now female, and the Gordons, who are canonically white with red hair, are now black, and Harleen Quinzel is an Asian woman.
Hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
Diversity is incredibly important for entertainment. Not only that, I think it's a necessity. Whether one wants to admit it or not, white people, and specifically white males, dominated all forms of entertainment for decades. Though there were definitely gems here and there, I get the need for more marginalized communities and cultures to see themselves represented on screen. It's important because it can expose us to new ideas, new ways of developing a story, and gives us a better understanding of the people around us. So I understand the Caped Crusader wanting to have more diversity in its story. My problem is when it comes at the expense of already established characters. I know for me, it's hard to get invested in an established character I love when their physical appearance is completely different. It's just the reality of the situation. That's not the character I grew up loving. Now I can already see someone like, wow, it says a lot about you if you hyperfixate on the race of a character. It's not important at the end of the day. Well, if it's not important, then why change it in the first place? I want diversity within media, but this isn't the way to go about it. You can't just radically change a pre-existing character and expect people not to be angered by the decision. Looking at you, Netflix Death Note. Oh, I hate that movie so much. I saw an interesting quote where Bruce Timm gave his reasoning for gender swapping Penguin. In an interview with Television Academy, quote,
James and I were talking about the overview of the show, and we said one of the problems with Batman, as he is there's a lack of good villains. You've got Catwoman, you've got Poison Ivy, you've got Harley Quinn, but it would be really good to have more female villains. And off the top of my head, I said, we never really could figure out exactly what to do with the Penguin, what the gimmick for the Penguin would be. What if we gender flip the Penguin?
Wow, there is so much wrong with this. What about Talia al Ghul, Lady Shiva, Copperhead, It's an Alias, Lynx, Baby Doll, Nora Fields? One of the best aspects of the animated series was that not only did it show off obscure villains in the Batman mythos, but they also created some of the best villains we now know today. Why not use an obscure villain as one of the main antagonists of an episode instead of gender bending a previously established popular character? This goes for Barbara and Jim Gordon as well. Why is there this incessant need I've seen where Hollywood is turning traditional redhead characters black? If we're going to pay attention to people's ethnicity and cultural heritage, which we should, the Gordons are of Scottish descent, so why not respect or represent that side of the characters? If a goal of the show was to represent more marginalized communities and prominent roles, why not work with the diverse characters already established in the comics? Characters like Luke Fox, the son of Lucius Fox who becomes a member of the Bat family, or Cassandra Cain, a Chinese female who becomes one of the many Batgirls there are. Now granted, these characters aren't as well known in the public arena, but I think that's all the more reason to utilize them in a show like this. I just don't understand why the Caped Crusader didn't utilize these characters and instead went out of their way to change what came before. It's not just insulting to what's already established, but I think it's insulting to the communities they're trying to represent.
Alright, Jokers, prepare to receive a fierce pounding.
Alright, so I've already talked about my problems with gender and race swapping, but did they at least get the characters' personalities right? Despite the physical changes, were they true to the character's essence? For the most part, no. I mean, Gordon is kind of the same. Barbara isn't so lucky. I mean, she's not terrible, but she's missing so many of the qualities I love about the character. Her wide-eyed spontaneity mixed with the maternal voice of reason is completely absent here. She's pretty much a blank slate of personality who's just kind of stern sometimes. They stripped her of any charm present from the original character. Penguin is a woman now, but what about the personality? In the comics, it shows how he's been insulted all of his life due to his physical appearance, so in return lashed out at the world, becoming one of the most ruthless crime lords in Gotham to get the respect he thinks he deserves. He's a nasty, bitter, and dangerous man. In Caped Crusader, while it's revealed in private she's just as ruthless as the original character, in her public persona, for some reason, everyone loves her, and like there's men who fall at her feet. I'm sorry, but there is no way any man would fall head over heels for this creature of the underworld. Now, before you say anything, I doubt your average female would get seduced by a man that looked like this. People are afraid of Penguin because of how ruthless he is to get people's respect. But no, we're supposed to buy that this woman actually has people who love and admire her.
That don't make no sense.
Now, Harley Quinn was one of the most talked about characters in the show. If they at least kept some of the aspects of the characters like Gordon and Penguin, other than wearing a jester outfit, there is no resemblance to Harley Quinn's original depiction. Now, I know Bruce Timm created the character for the animated series and can do what he wants, but this new version is just not it. I get what they were going for with this version. Jesters in medieval times were used as a way to make fun of those in power, so this version of the character will kidnap and ridicule members of Gotham's elite for their supposed wrongdoings. I think there's something to work with there, but she's been built up in the show as a therapist for powerful people in the city, and then randomly one episode it reveals, uh-oh, she's been a bad guy all along. But like, why? What made her this way? What made her become a jester that humiliates rich people? And if she's going to be so radically different from the original character, why not just make an entirely new character? These are the types of creative decisions I can't stand. That's not to say it can't work. For example, Mr. Freeze before the animated series was taken about as seriously as Condiment Man, but in that show they completely changed him from his comic book counterpart into a deeply sympathetic man wanting to save his wife. Sometimes characters can be adapted differently, but if the character is already beloved as is, why radically change them into something else? Especially when that version is nowhere near as compelling to what came before. Now, I've been digging on this show a lot, but that's not to say it doesn't do anything well. In fact, there's a lot here that works, and I don't think the haters of the show are giving it enough credit. So let me go over. By far and away for me, the most important thing to get right in a Batman adaptation is Batman himself, specifically his no-kill policy. He has it in here, so that's a win right there. Besides that, in terms of showing his character's psychology, I think the show tries and succeeds in exploring new avenues and scenarios with the character. We get to see a lot more of Bruce in settings we normally don't see, such as a therapy session where he disses or plays down the trauma he felt watching his parents die, or watching him trying to be normal and friendly at a party after taking off the cowl. Again, in terms of dissecting Batman and Bruce as a character, it doesn't radically change the wheel, but it got his core elements right, his no-kill rule, and his essentially split personality between the persona of Bruce and his true self, Batman. Also, some of the adaptations of pre-existing characters are cool. Clayface was pretty neat. Not only is his design unique, but I like the more serial killer aspects they bring to him. Automatopoeia is awesome as well. He's just this hitman for the mob who has an ominous presence, but whenever he speaks and only says things like pow, bang, boom, not only is it somewhat funny, but it makes him all the more engaging to watch. Another character I started out indifferent towards, but ended up loving was Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. At the start of the show, he's basically a rival lawyer for Barbara Gordon. Oh yeah, she's a lawyer in this. And he's also made out to be a typical sleazy Saul Goodman-esque lawyer type. He's harsh and is willing to lie to defend corrupt people, as opposed to the comics where he's a handsome savior of Gotham. And this though, when he starts to realize the power of the mob and how much they've affected the city, he begins to turn back on them and actually stand up to the corruption plaguing Gotham. Of course, the mob isn't happy with it, and the acid in his face happens and yada yada yada. I won't spoil what happens from here, but what they do with Harvey and Two-Face, I love. They basically focus on a man who is having to come face to face, no pun intended, with the mistakes that led him to this point and how he can redeem himself, while at the same time control his anger towards those who wronged him. It was a very unique and intriguing story for Two-Face's character, and I can easily see why people say it's probably the best part of the show, because objectively it is. Now, getting away from the characters, there's other aspects of the show that are really good. The design of the 1940s Gotham is pretty cool, though at times kind of just feels like a 1940s New York. I think it's missing the gothicness of something like the animated series. The harsh blacks and contrasts with color gave it such a unique aesthetic, whereas in the Caped Crusader, it feels like a generic Art Deco city. However, what helps sets the mood for this city and the show is the musical score. Holy shit. This score is amazing. As opposed to the more bombastic score of the animated series, Caped Crusader has a slow, swelling score, and it feels like you're being cradled into this world of crime and darkness. I can't play it because I'd get copyrighted, but just look up the opening theme. It gives me chills every time. So overall, yeah, those are my thoughts on the show. I think Caped Crusader is flawed in many ways, but I hate that so many people are dismissing the show for doing dumb things, but aren't willing to acknowledge some exceptional aspects of it. I think when it comes to tackling problems plaguing modern entertainment, I think it's important to understand the intent of the creators working on them. You can tell when something's operating in a flawed mindset versus being overtly spiteful. I think it's also important to point out when a flawed project does things well, because even though I had my problems with the show, I wouldn't mind a season 2 that tries to correct some of the problems people had with this season. Some things are irreversible, but the show, and to a larger extent the Batman franchise, is far from being beyond repair. After all, if Batman can survive this...
Hi, Freeze. I'm Batman.
It can survive anything.